competency-based education in the U.S. Education based on competencies. It fell out of favor in the U.S. And then shifted to outcomes-based curriculum and outcomes-based education. But I know that it's a term that is still used and very much in use in Latin America and in other parts of the world. Okay, we use the word competency. And what I discovered last week is that actually in the world of occupations in the U.S., this is the term that's used, competency. A competency is really an integration, a collection of knowledge, skills, and attitudes that together make up whatever that competency is. Let me give you an example. So it's the combination of skills, abilities, and knowledge needed to perform a task. And it's the result of a lot of learning experiences in which you develop the skills, abilities, and knowledge to form learning. And in different contexts, competencies look a little bit different. Now, for me, and the reason that I've moved away from competencies is that for our purposes in defining curriculum, it's easier, in designing the curriculum, it's easier if we separate out the knowledge and skills and attitudes and don't put them all together in one competency. Or if we put them together, we have to pull them out at some point. All right? So I think in the list of competencies that you have in your curriculum, as I look at them, for me, some of them are competencies by this definition. Some of them look more like just skills. It's not a big knowledge base or attitude base. Well, I take that back. But to go from the competency to actually teaching it, you have to really take it apart and identify the parts of it, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Okay? Which is why, for me, I don't go to this step. I like to go right to what's the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, no matter how they're combined. Okay? But if you're used to the word competency, this is what we're going to use. Okay? Let me just give you some examples then and you have already identified your cross-curriculum competencies. But let me just give you some sources of some others. There was an article written by Paulson, Karen, called Using Competencies to Connect the Workplace and Post-Secondary Education. And these were the ones, and there's the next slide, there are 2 slides full. And I show them to you just for you to look at, because what's useful is to say, okay, here's the list that we've come up with. How does that compare with what other people are doing, and should I be including some others? And that's the only reason we're showing you this list. Now, when I tried to retrieve that article online, I'm not sure where I found it the first time, because to go to that now, you have to sign into the website to get a copy of this article. But when I find where I found it, so I couldn't retrieve it again last night. But so these are the examples. Oh, I'm sorry, I want to go back again. Attitudes and personal characteristics. Okay. Essential skills. Applied skills. Premium skills. Now, you may not put them in those categories, but if you look at each line, there may be some that's in your list. Okay? This is an example. But the other so here are yours. Okay? Your cross-curricular competencies. Okay. Critical thinking. Okay? And so notice problem solving. Notice what I say is this competency, but look at everything that's required. There's a knowledge base, there's some reasoning skills, There's a conceptual and knowledge foundation to be able to do this. So that follows that first definition of competency. There's a lot going on. So communication, leadership, and personal characteristics, skills, I think you got it?
Yeah.
Skills.
Interpersonal skills.
Skills.
Okay. Well, it says, I looked at my own translation, interpersonal and leadership skills. Okay. Although, as in the CDIO syllabus, it's leadership skills related to managing work teams. Okay. One of the things that we're going to look at when we look at the revised, the version 2 of the CDIO syllabus, because version 1 looks at leadership only as it relates to teamwork, and it's in the teamwork category. Okay. In version 2, when we look at it, you're going to see that it's looking at leadership and leadership skills more broadly. Okay. So you may want to think about, do you want to separate those, that interpersonal skills? Let me not get into that now, but these are what's in there, and lifelong learning, staying current in one's profession, and lifelong learning. Okay. And then you have professional competencies, and this is for the IS, systems engineering. Systems engineering, okay, and those are some professional competencies. All right. I want to show you a source that actually I didn't know about till last week when I was in Bogota, and one of the professors in the automation program area I discovered this source, and it's from the U.S. Department of Labor. And there is a competency model clearinghouse. In other words, it's a collection of a lot of competency models in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different career areas. So if you are online and you go to that website, you will see that they do, this is the generic model, and you can't read it on here, it's a little too small. Oh, you might be able to read it on your own screen. They have personal effectiveness competencies, academic competencies, workplace competencies, competencies that are specified by the industry, industry-wide technical competencies, industry sector. So industry-wide, industry specifically to a sector, technical competencies, management competencies, occupation-specific requirements. These would be your professional requirements. And so they set them all up this way. And there is one, let me just give you the, okay, so does everyone have that website? Okay. Because if you go to that website, this is a sample. There are more than this. But this is a sample of the careers, and they've already developed a whole list of competencies. Okay. So again, what's useful is to go to and for each one of those, there is a diagram, there's a pyramid. And if you click on that pyramid, it gives you very specific details, okay, about what those personal competencies are. It spells it out almost at the level of outcomes. So I think it's terribly useful to use as just checking against and helping you to define the competencies that you've chosen. But a couple of things to keep in mind, that because this is coming out, first of all, it's coming out of the U.S., so you're going to have a U.S. perspective on what's important competencies in industry in the U.S. But the other, so you have to keep that in mind. But for me, the more important thing to keep in mind is where this is coming from. This is coming from the Department of Labor, not the Department of Education, Department of Labor. So it's specifically job training, okay? Preparations for that job, all right? Now, is that a bad thing? No, because we talked so much yesterday that what we're doing is preparing people for a profession. We're not doing job training. So this is important, but it's not enough, because we're working with students in a university.
Somebody is erasing the fights.
Somebody erased.
Erase the fight.
Who's
Okay.
erasing
They are
fights?
practicing.
Okay,
So somebody made crazy things.
okay.
Erase the existing file, now add
Yeah.
24 file.
Okay, be careful on that. So the Dropbox has its limitations.
That's
That's information technology power.
So
Es
users,
un problema de indio que me pone chat, creo yo.
Yeah, so keep that in mind, that when we're working with students, we are doing preparation for the career. Okay? But it's not enough to do job training. We're not training them for a specific job. Hopefully, in their profession, they will have the ability to change jobs and do a lot of things in the future. You know, they're 20 years old or 22 years old. We can't say to them, all right, you're prepared for this little job and nothing else for the rest of your life. If I ask you, how many different jobs have you had? How many different careers have you had? No, I, for one, I keep changing careers, never mind jobs. So my education needs to prepare me to do that. Besides the fact, you're not dealing with adults in the sense that they're fully formed. You're dealing with students who are 18 to 23, 24. They're developing as persons, as human beings. And our education has to help them develop as human beings. So it's good to go here to get some of those professional skills and competencies, but keep in mind you're going to do more than that. Okay, so we'll come back to that. All right, what about this idea of objectives and outcomes? Now, if you're in, these words are used sometimes interchangeably. Okay. When I use them, you want to think of the objective in this way, very much like what you saw on the first page. Each day I said, here are the objectives for today. Okay. They're more specific than a competency, okay, but they're still at a pretty general level. Sometimes I use the word objective if I'm talking about the program level. And I talk about outcomes. Now, outcomes are more specific than objectives. What the learner will know, be able to do, and have an opinion about as a result of instruction, and it's more specific than an objective. Sometimes you'll hear intended learning outcome. But the words are used differently. Sometimes objectives are called goals. Sometimes you hear goals, objectives, and outcomes, and it's really, very often they're the same thing, only they're just getting much more detail. There's more detail at that level. Sometimes when I'm writing this, writing them, for example, well, maybe I'll try to pull that up. When, for accreditation, do they have to write program objectives and program outcomes? And
goals, learning goals and objectives.
learning goals and learning objectives. And what is the difference?
The learning goal is the big one, the statement of the competency, and the learning objective is more specific.
Okay.
It's
But-
the action.
But both of them written from the learner's perspective?
Excuse me?
The verb in that statement,
And just the verb.
is it the student who will do that, or the
Yes.
program that
No,
will do
the
that?
student.
The student, okay. Which is what, let me go back, don't get dizzy now, I'm gonna go back to the very first page. Okay? So if I said to you, we're gonna get, well, I probably went back to this too soon. This workshop is designed so that you, the learner, will be able to do this. And I'm still calling it an objective because it's more general than an outcome. But sometimes at the program level, and let me give you an example of when we do the accreditation for ABET. Again, we have to write educational objectives and educational outcomes. And when I wrote those for our program in aerospace, I used objective as what the program will do. The objective, the goal of the program. And the outcome, what will happen, what will change, will occur in the students. So for example, I would write from the program's perspective, the goal is to provide opportunities for students to be able to do blah, 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 blah. Okay? It's what the program is going to provide. So in that case, it's not written from the learner's perspective, but from the program's perspective. But again, that is kind of a local interpretation of how you want to write that. So in the final analysis, you will hear me, I will rarely talk about a competency, okay? But that's only in my use of the words. And very often, I will interchange objective and outcome. Because except for that accreditation document, I write objectives from the students, excuse me, the student's perspective. And it has that same meaning as it does in your accreditation, it's just more detailed. Okay, all right. And you might use them interchangeably.
Excuse me, Doris. You said that an objective is more general than an outcome. In our practice, the outcome is more general than an object.
Ah, because you see the outcome as
Did you
as
read
the competency.
The outcomes,
Okay,
if you read our outcomes, is more general than a learning objective or something like that.
okay, okay,
It could be said that
okay.
as you move from competency to objectives, the outcomes, you are moving to something more measurable?
Yes, yes, good point. Because his comment was that as you move from competency to objective to outcome, it's getting more detailed. Does that mean it's also more measurable? Yes. Okay?
But
The more detailed and specific you can be, the more, now be careful about the word measurable, particularly when I'm talking to engineers.
Okay.
Okay? When you measure something in engineering, you're using numbers and you have physical references. Okay? And you can say, okay, this is longer than this because I can measure it in inches. I mean, and I can get 7 decimal points to show you the difference. Okay? We're not measuring that. We're trying to look at something that's inside. Learning is inside. It's a mental structure. And the only way that I know if someone has that mental structure, if they know something, if they've learned something, is they have to get it out. They have to demonstrate it in some way. So that it's observable and I can gather evidence. So I like to use the word accessible, although it means the same thing as measurable. It has less of a meaning that there are some numbers attached to it. Are numbers attached to it good? Yes, but you can't put physical measures on a lot of what we do in learning. But Fernando's point is unless I can make this knowledge, skill, and attitude very detailed, it's going to be hard. Okay? Because if I just said to you, can the student, critical thinking, competency. Okay? And if I just say, okay, I'm going to assess critical thinking. Okay? Okay. So, so I might say that Efran is a better critical thinker than Andres. What's my evidence? Okay? I can't go up and take a little tape measure. Okay, he's a better critical thinker. He has a bigger brain. Okay. So I'm looking for evidence all the
Álvaro
time.
is more
You have to assist the
Critical thinking.
It's very true. Okay. So what do I have to do is I have to say, what does it mean to be a critical thinker? Okay. So what am I doing? I'm getting some learning objectives, I'm getting some learning outcomes. I have some ways that I look at some evidence. Okay? So that will be an important concept. So, say-
Yo lo que aquí, disculpen en Spanish.
That's okay.
Tuvimos unas discusiones, pero bizantinas.
No creo.
¿O creen?
Totalmente relevante, me ha parecido.
¿Qué?
Las discusiones que hemos tenido.
So
Digo, le damos
this
vueltas para arriba y para abajo.
is, so this is confusing what,
But finally, this is a naming problem.
that's
Because,
right.
yeah.
And it makes no difference in the
No,
end.
that's it.
It makes no difference.
But
So what-
now it's clear, but we
Oh,
Pero no tiene que estar claro en el vocabulario.
Claro.
Sí, pero hay que escoger
Los
el
Andes
vocabulario
University
ya.
begins the process writing a glossary with the meaning of the words.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the really important point, because you can call it outcome or competence or whatever you want, but the point is that everyone must have the same idea in your mind. That's a really important point.
Right.
Because after that, I think it's very relevant the point of Fernando, and it's that you want to assess the goal or the competence or the objective and the level of the game. That's the content of the
Absolutely, absolutely. So if what I call outcome, you call objective, in the end, it doesn't matter really what you call them.
Yeah.
Except if you're trying to communicate to someone else, you want to make sure you're using the words in the same way. So when we look at a list of program outcomes, you might call them outcomes, you might call them program objectives, you might call them program competencies. As long as we know that they have to be specific enough to be measurable, accessible, and written from the student's perspective, it doesn't, I don't really care what you call them. All right, so what is the central question? What is the central question, no matter what you call them? And we can then agree in a few minutes on what we will call them, at least for today, is that you want to ask yourself, and we asked this yesterday, and one of you remembered it, I think it was you, learning about knowledge, skills, and attitudes that we want our students to develop by the time they graduate from our programs.
And that's about the comment you did before about the newspaper.
Yes,
You know?
yes, and some of you were not here yet, and I said, this is really very interesting because your El Tiempo now has debes saber, debes leer, and debes hacer. Okay? Now, it's not quite that. This is kind of, you need to be aware of, you need to really know. So those are both in knowledge. But you need to be able to do. It's the skills. Okay? And they don't have anything. You know the little one. You need to have an opinion or an attitude about it. They don't have that in there. And unfortunately, many of our programs are missing that piece as well. Okay. this represents the importance of alignment. We're talking here now. This is the knowledge and skills and attitudes that you want students to develop. Your competencies are in here, the program competencies you want students to develop. They have to be aligned with the mission of ISAZI. Okay? You can't have, and you have to make sure that whatever you have in this list, you haven't really gone in a different direction. And that's particularly true when you get to values. The values of ISAZI are very different from the values of other universities in Cali, from other universities in Colombia, from other universities in the world. And you have to make sure that if your ISAZI says these values are important to ISAZI, they're important that students are aware of the values and develop these values and learn to live by these values. But if there's nothing in your program outcomes that says anything about these values, you're missing something. If it doesn't appear here, it's never going to get done. Okay? Or it'll happen just by maturation. Students getting older and living may develop.
Is an outcome and a specific objective?
Yes. It has to be written as a specific objective. So when I look at this, all right, let me give you the examples that I took from the documents that you sent me ahead of time, okay? And this may not be exactly right, but this is my translation and interpretation of what I think I saw in the document, okay? But this is the very general, why does ISAZI exist?
That's the mission statement.
There's your mission statement, okay? You want to build a better world. Now, how general is that? If I say to you, okay, let's assess that. Are we achieving our mission? There's a lot that goes involved, In addition to your own efforts, the world getting better, okay?
Knowledge and action.
Oh, yes.
And the
Okay.
focus is in knowledge and action, but involved the students and the academic community.
So do you see that already in trying to say, how are we going to make this happen? You're saying, okay, this means that. So you're already trying to get some more detail, okay? Remember we talked about yesterday, the vision. What's the picture you have in your head? Where should this, in what direction should this university be going? Where will we be in 5 years? Where will we be, actually, where will we be tomorrow? Where will we be in 5 years, in 10 years? What's our vision for the perfect ISAZI University?
But also where our students will be.
And the students, what's your vision for the students, for the graduates?
Yeah.
Yes. See. Okay. And how will you be known by others? Será reconocido. People are going to look at ISAZI and say, this is what we see when we look at ISAZI. Okay, that's the vision.
Model of excellence in learning, research, and social intervention.
Okay? So, if that's your vision, if you're going to get there, your outcomes should say something about knowledge. What is it they have to know? Excellence in knowledge, research, and commitment to society. Okay? So if you don't put it in here, it's not going to happen. Values, in your value statement, and there may be more, but this is what I got from the document. Okay? Now, when it comes to values and attitudes, is this going to be easy to assess? Absolutely not. And for a lot of people, they say, this is not, particularly when educational objectives really began being used and specified in education, people said, if you can't measure it, it's not an objective, it's not an outcome. And don't write it if you can't measure it. And they were thinking, okay, getting a number in the short term. So they don't write any outcomes. having to do with values. But I take the same stand. If it's not in here, it's not going to happen. So I'd encourage you, write attitude outcomes, even when you're not sure yet how you're going to assess them, or if you're going to be able to assess them in the short term. Because attitudes take a long time to develop, and your courses are only a certain number of months. Okay. So you may not be able to assess the whole picture of the attitude, but if you don't put it in, you don't address it. If you don't put it in, you never give students opportunities to develop it. Right? The same thing. And these objectives now will be the objectives, the goals probably of the university, but this also includes now the overall goals of your program area. So probably, if I were going to put the competencies anywhere, and don't forget now this document, this is where I didn't list them all, but on page 4 in that document, numbers 1 to 10 talk about the overall goals and objectives. Do you know what that document, are you all familiar? Oh, this, did this come out of one program? Is this for the university-wide, or is this?
In the university.
University, so not just, okay, and you're saying you saw that document. So this is, is this one here? Oh, this must come out of your office. Process of self-evaluation. Does this come out of your presentation? Okay. But this is the document that I was referring to. Page 4, list. Oh, this is systems engineering. Okay. This is from systems engineering. And on page 4, and I'll send this around. Page 4 of this document. Here we go. Strategic objectives. Oh no, these are strategic objectives of the university.
Oh, the 10.
The 10
core
strategic
objectives.
objectives of the university. So we're still at ISAISI level here, okay? Objectives. But the importance here is, if you have documents describing the university, your program exists at this university. So systems engineering at ISAISI may look different from systems engineering at MIT.
Yeah.
Different university, here, different culture, different country, different culture.
Its own personality.
It's exactly right, its own personality. So you need to be aware of these kinds of documents and these kinds of lists to make sure that when you write your own program outcomes, that they're in line. Okay. And I'm going to shift now and keep calling them program outcomes. Okay. When you write a program outcome, and those of you who have already started writing program outcomes, they're student focused. By that I mean it's what changes will occur in the student. Not what I will do as an instructor, not what I will do as ISAISI, not what I will do, but what is going to happen to the students. It focuses on the results of the program by the time they finish the program. Okay? It reflects the mission and values of the university, and it's in alignment. We've already said that. Okay? And it focuses on skills and abilities central to the discipline. So it has to be about systems engineering. And based on professional standards. You probably have standards from the profession of systems engineers, or engineering standards. Standards for engineers. Standards for the business community. Standards for professional economics. Okay. So, and it has to be the central ones there. They're general enough to capture important learning, but clear and specific enough to be, and I'm still using the word measurable here, okay? And they focus on aspects of learning that will develop and endure but that can be assessed in some form. Now, in other words, you want to think about, when you ask that question, how important is this skill? Is this, or knowledge, this new idea, this concept, this principle in my field? The concept of negotiation. Is that an important concept? You want to ask yourself, well, it is important for this course. And when they leave this course, they really are never going to use that again. It does not endure. It's what I call the deves leer. It's a nice to know, but it's not enduring. But there are some things that are part of our course that are so central to the discipline or so central to the profession that even when they finish this course, even when they finish all the courses, even when they finish university, this is something that needs to endure. So everything that we teach is not in that category. I know we think it is. You know, you need this for the rest of your life, and it's going to make a difference for the rest of your life. Well, you know, it doesn't.
But here we have something like 3 levels, I think. And maybe the first in the sense of the university is that what we call the common core.
See?
Okay? And when we think about the common core, we think about something that we call the more general transversal competence. But after, we have the vision and the mission of the a set of programs. Not really only one program, but a set of programs. And after that, it comes the program itself.
Right.
And I think we have to separate the way as we face each of those, because maybe in the final level we have to think more about knowledge, but maybe not in the first one, about the common core. This is not really about knowledge, it's more about personal skills or something like that. I don't know.
But see, I think that,
Values, yes.
that everyone, and I'm using core here a little bit differently from common core. I'm talking about within the discipline. If I'm the mathematics instructor, I have to look at my discipline and make that same decision. What are those enduring concepts that students are going to need no matter where they go? And what do I do that it's important to know, and what is nice to know? I think every discipline has to do that. So it's not as though the core courses are in one group and they don't have any enduring knowledge. Every discipline has to make that decision. And in one of the books that's in your reference list, they do a nice job of this idea of enduring understanding. And there's a diagram in the Wiggins and McTighe book that we talked about. And they do when they talk about enduring understanding, they draw a circle. And here's enduring. Everybody knows what I mean by enduring? It lasts. Okay? Enduring understanding. Okay. Then they say, okay, there's another group up here, and this is important to know. Important to know. Okay. And they don't define whether it's short term, but it's important to know. And this category up here is they call nice to know. Okay? We want to make students aware of it. It's nice to know that. But it doesn't carry the same importance as enduring understanding. And the difficulty with us as instructors, okay, if Economics is your discipline. Everything is enduring understanding to you. And we have a hard time separating out, really, for the rest of the world, much of what I know as an economist is really nice to know. And I have to make the distinction. Okay? Same thing in your professional areas. And I have to be careful about this too as a teacher. Because I have a background in education, I might want to put everything in here for you. You know, this is going to change your life. You know, you need this for the rest of your life. And really, a lot of what we talk about is kind of nice to know. It's hard for me to separate that because this is my love. This is what I do. This is what I know. But as instructors, you want to be able to do that. Because what does that say? It says that if something falls in the category of enduring understanding, you need to spend more time on it. You need to assess this to see if the students really have. If it's in this nice to know, certainly you include it. But you don't have to spend as much time. Remember, it's always a trade-off. We have just so much time. Because what are we tempted to do? We list in our syllabus all of the topics we want to talk about. And we treat them as though they're all equally important. They are to us. But you need to think, in the long run, thinking about the outcomes for students, some are more important than others. Okay? So this is what it's saying. When you're going to write a learning outcome, you want to make sure that you've got learning outcomes for this enduring stuff. And probably the important to know. And maybe you don't need a learning outcome that you have to assess. That doesn't mean don't put it in your course. It just means treat them a little bit differently. Okay. Here's an example of a list of program outcomes for engineering. And that's what we call, in the CDIO approach, this is what we call the CDIO syllabus. And this is what you have in the first of the handouts. The CDIO syllabus, version 2, condensed. Actually, you have more than what's on the screen. It is an example of a list of program outcomes for engineering. It was more than 2 years development. So we offer it in the CDIO approach, not because you have to, it is not what we say carved in stone. Not because if you're going to be a CDIO program, this is your Bible and you have to do this. We offer it because we've spent a lot of time developing it and testing it with program stakeholders. And program stakeholders have said, yes, this is what's important. Okay? And the difference between what you have, this we have up here, let me just look at this. Okay. Now, what you have in this condensed version doesn't look exactly like this, because you have just statements or topics, okay? Personal and professional skills and attributes, okay. Analytical reasoning and problem solving. Look at 2.1. 2.1. On here it says analytical reasoning and problem solving. I might call that, now I might use a new language, I might call that a competency. We usually call it a topic, but actually it's a competency. What you have on the screen, look at 2.1. It's now written as a learning outcome, or a program outcome. And what's the difference?
Action.
It's measurable, it's an action. It's what students will do with this topic. They will analyze problems, okay? So I've taken the topic, the competency, okay, and I've written it as a program outcome. Students will be able to analyze and solve problems. Okay? And what you have on here is not only at this level, you have this level, technical knowledge and reasoning, personal and professional skills and attributes, 1, 2, 3, interpersonal skills, 4, and what you should recognize now that this category 4, this is your professional practice. Okay, and because this is an example for engineering, it's CDIO. You were in business, according to the one we used yesterday, PODC. Here's your PODC. And I'm working on one of those. I'm working on one of these for the pastoral theology. I haven't yet shown it to the theologians. They're going to think I'm crazy. But I'm trying to develop that same kind of, can I try to summarize the professional practice and put it in this 4th category, or A category. And notice, and you have this level on here, but what you also have on here is the next level of detail. So this is what we call the CDIO syllabus at the 3rd level of detail. 1st level of detail, 2nd level of detail, and you'll notice it, because it's engineering, we have to do the 2.1.1 and the 2.1.1.1. All right. The other thing that you're going to notice, since this is version 1, we're almost ready for coffee here. The coffee, is it here yet? Okay, we're almost ready. This is version 1, and this is version 2. Now the biggest difference, you'll find some differences in language for a second. Let me go back. You see how this 2.5 was demonstrate professional habits that contribute to the successful, okay. This was very general, and under this, we used to have ethics under there and lifelong learning and a whole, well, ethics is so important that in this next version, we actually took some things that were in here and put them in here, like lifelong learning, and left this to be just ethics. So if you see 2.5, it's ethics, equity, and other responsibilities, just to highlight. But the biggest difference is at the very end that there's now a 4.7 and a 4.8. And the reason for that, again, our stakeholders were saying that since we developed this syllabus, the importance of leadership and entrepreneurship have really risen to the top. And we used to just say, well, yes, it's hidden in there. There's leadership, it's already there, and entrepreneurship is already there. But it was buried in the 2nd or 3rd level. So what this is doing is it's saying, as part of the professional practice, we need not only the process of engineering, but we need to address leading engineering endeavors. See how it's much broader than just leading teams. We used to have, I mean, we still do, in under 3, which is teamwork, 3.1.4, team leadership. So when we talk about leadership, it came under the umbrella of teams. This is saying now, 4.7, leading engineering endeavors, not just the teams, but the whole engineering process. We need to be preparing leaders. And the whole idea of entrepreneurship. So that combination of engineers are going